Welcome to Datamatics. My name is Katya. I'm here with Summer Jeffers, and today we're talking about paid sick leave in the United States. As you know, Summer, I'm from Ukraine, and there we have 2 weeks of paid sick leave minimum, and mostly it's not classified. So how things are going in the States?
Well, Katya, interesting that you bring that up because, as you probably know, the United States is one of only 3 countries, industrialized nations in the world, that don't offer paid leave, that doesn't offer paid leave at a national level. Now, you probably have heard terms such as maternity or jury duty, paternity, bereavement, things like that. And we certainly have labels for when employees are not working. What we're talking about today, though, is government-required leave that employers must give their employees. The only one really in existence, and that was passed in 1993, is the Family Medical Leave Act. FMLA is the sole federal law requiring or protecting employees if they need to miss work due to a serious health condition for themselves or their family. The big thing about FMLA, though, is that it does not apply to everybody. It only applies to employers that have 50 or more employees, and not all employees are eligible. It depends on what the situation is, and most significant is the fact that it's an unpaid leave.
Okay, so what about the federal employees?
Well, certainly federal employees have paid sick leave. They accrue approximately 13 days a year based on accruing a half a day every 4 hours for each biweekly pay period for a full-time federal employee. So yes, federal employees do have paid sick leave. And as you may have heard, President Obama last Labor Day, September of 2015, passed an executive order requiring any federal contractors to provide their employees with paid sick leave. The employees are entitled to earn up to 7 days per year, and this is expected to impact over 300,000 employees.
Is everything mostly the same for the private sector employees?
Absolutely not. And this is the big issue here, is that the statistics show that 39% of private sector employees cannot earn paid sick leave. If you flip that, that means 61% of private sector do earn paid sick leave, and we'll cover that a little bit later in this presentation. But the big thing here is the private sector and government's involvement in regulating the private sector and what employers are required to provide their employees with. So the big reason why this is such a topic in the news is because even though 39% is not a huge percentage, it's really who's being affected by this lack of paid sick leave. And as this chart shows, it is the low-wage earners. So the 61% of employees who do get paid sick leave are typically in the white-collar industries. It's the retail and food service workers and bus drivers, etc., the low-wage earners who don't have the right to take paid sick leave and are protected.
So as I know, not everywhere you have paid sick leave, and are there any specific locations where employees are paid, or maybe some states?
Yep, absolutely. So this is what's going on today, is that over the last 7-8 years, actually 2007 was the first time, so 9 years I guess now, localities and states to go ahead and pass local laws regulating employers to require their employees to be entitled to sick leave. So as this map shows, most of the work is being done on the East and the West Coast, but we're going to go over some specifics in a moment. So, as I mentioned a moment ago, 2007, San Francisco, California was the first locality to pass a paid sick leave law. As you'll see from this chart, the numbers have been steadily increasing. '07 and '08, we saw one pass, San Francisco and then Washington, D.C. 2012, there were 2, including a statewide law in the state of Connecticut. 2014, 5 new laws. These are all local citywide laws. SeaTac, Portland, Jersey City, New York City, and Newark, New Jersey. 2015, 13 new laws passed, and 2016, and we're only 4 months through it, had 8 new laws passed. Not only is it complicated to know jurisdictionally what is applicable to an employer, but as you see from the asterisks, there are nuances with each law. There are specific requirements, there are specific exceptions. So this is what the big burden is going to be on employers, to have to comply with each specific law rather than there being a national standard.
Can you give us any examples?
Of course. So when an employer is looking to see whether or not they need to comply with a specific regulation, first you need to look at your jurisdiction and say, okay, is there a law here? And then you're going to see if it applies to you by whether or not you're subject to the law based on the number of employees that you're employing. So as this chart shows, there are many places that just say, hey, 1 employee. As soon as you have 1 employee, then you are subject to complying with the law. Some places have 5+ employees, like New York City. But as I mentioned a moment ago, then there is exceptions. So New York City, it's 5 or more employees, except that if it's a domestic worker, you just need to have 1, and you must give them paid sick leave. Portland, Oregon, another asterisk, another exception. Portland, Oregon's paid sick leave law was on the books before the Oregon statewide law, which went into effect this January 2016. The statewide law did. But Portland, Oregon was on the books, and while the state law said that it was preempting and prohibiting any city or local laws, the exception was Portland. So Oregon's law is for 10 employees or more, but Portland's threshold is 6 employees for an employer who is located in Portland. And the Oregon statute says, yep, Portland statute may continue. So there's another exception nuance that's difficult for employers to keep track of and comply with. Another example is the state of Connecticut, 50 employees. But then there's all these other rules you need to look at. So Connecticut's 50 employees, and it needs to accrue 1 hour for every 40 hours worked. And the employees can accrue time immediately upon beginning employment. However, they can't use any of their time until the 680th hour of work. As you see, a lot of this comes down to tracking hours worked and staying on top of what the regulation is and clearly understanding when it's applicable and when it's not. We'll go through an example here. So California, the state of California's law is that any employee who works in the state of California for 30 or more days within a year from the beginning of their employment, that employee then is entitled to paid sick leave. This means employers need to carefully track how many days the employee works in California.
But what if the employer is located in the state of Washington and one of the employer's workers occasionally works in California? Is the worker entitled to paid sick leave?
Well, as we saw a moment ago, that employee, if they work for 30 days in California, then yes, that employee is now eligible for the California paid sick leave law, and the employer has to comply. Okay, everybody, so wrapping it up here, there's certainly a lot to stay on top of nationwide in terms of any place that you do business. Not having a federal law has actually just brought complexity because all of these local laws are kicking in and employers need to stay on top of it and understand the differences and apply different rules. Additionally, even if you are in a jurisdiction that does not have a law on the books, many private employers are giving paid sick leave or any sort of leave to their employees. As we saw at the very beginning, 61% of private sector employees are entitled to paid sick leave. So it's equally important, though, for you as employers to read your own policies and make sure that you're complying. And we're even at the point where we need to start seeing what other people are doing, what other businesses are doing. Microsoft and Facebook are examples of private employers who have joined this initiative to provide and mandate paid sick leave throughout the country. So both of these companies have said that any of their own vendors or contractors must provide leave to their employees. So it's definitely a big push, not just from the government right now at the state and local level, but also from private sector employees and private sector employers who are saying enough is enough. We need to provide our employees with time off for the health and benefit of everybody.
But what should we do next? Are there any tips what businesses can do?
Well, certainly there are suggestions, and we need to stay on top of this. For more information, more detailed information about specific laws and tips on how to audit and how to go about complying, join our full webinar. You can go to the Datamatics website at www.datamaticsinc.com. We will be having a webinar on leave law trends throughout the United States on June 7th at 1 p.m. In terms of staying in the know, join any webinars you can go to. Also consult with experts. Seek out counsel. Seek out HR experts who are really staying on top of these issues. For your business, you're going to want to make sure to audit. Review the laws that your company is doing business, the states that your company is doing business in, and the laws there. And also, like I mentioned, review your own company policies. Your policy may be able to coexist with any jurisdictional law in place, so that's definitely something that you want to review and consider. You'll want to analyze the procedures that you have in place and the results of them. So, for example, you might have a PTO policy in place, and then now your jurisdiction just passed a law that specifies you have to specifically give sick leave. So you may be able to just tweak the way that your labor management system conveys the leave that you're already providing. There's definitely things that you can do there. And finally, you want to develop compliance strategies, both long and short term, in order to make sure that going down the road, you stay on top of these changes and that you're prepared and able to make a quick change should you need to. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Again, feel free to join on for our webinar on June 7th. And if you have any questions or comments on this video, please leave them in the comment field. Thank you.
Thank you, Summer, for your presentation. It was really interesting.